Welcome to part 2 of my how to build a deck video. I'm Robin Clevitt. You're joining me here now to watch me as I measure, mark and cut the joists and get the frame prepared, ready for the decking. In this video I'm going to tell you about the type of decking I'm using, my thought process behind that and the reasons why I chose the product that I'm eventually going to lay. So sit back, relax and enjoy, and let's get on with it. So the next job for me is to measure the joist that I'm going to cut for these two bays. If you watched episode 1, I spoke about taking care in setting everything out, so when you're cutting your joists, you're cutting the same number of joists, exactly the same length. So basically that's crucial for me because it equals time and also accuracy. So when you lay your deck boards on, everything's nice and parallel, nice and square. I've set all of these frames out with these braces. The braces are just temporary and they're just holding everything parallel and square. You can see some diagonal ones going across there. I'll joist it out and I'll remove them as I go, keeping it nice and square. So how will I measure? Well, obviously there's a tape measure, so you can use a tape measure. I'm going to be measuring at the end points, the corner points, which is where they're fixed, because everything in between may have a bit of undulation, but they'll get pulled straight with the joists. I took particular care when I put that hole plate on the wall to make sure that was nice and straight, and that's where I started from and came away. So I've also got a device here which is really nice. It's very good and quick. It's an electronic or laser tape measure, and I'll just run that round and we'll look at the differences there is everywhere. So the laser tape measure has given me 4 dimensions. It's all recorded on the screen and they vary between 1 millimeter. So what I'll do in this case is I'll make them to the shortest measurement. So there's 2 mil difference between the longest and the shortest, and a lot of that is explainable by the fact that you sometimes get a cup in a timber. So where I place the tape from, in the center of the center, that might be the 2 mil. So that's that way of doing it. And if I just try to let the camera focus on those measurements, you can see they vary from 2 down to 0. Obviously the other way is with a tape. Let's see what it reads when I do it with a tape measure in this position. So I would read that as 2150, which is the shortest measurement. So I know just through experience to allow that mill as I go. And then you don't need a fancy tape, electronic tape, or you don't need a tape measure. Some of the best ways of measuring and marking is just with a piece of wood. Let me just show you that. So I've got a piece of wood, could be any piece of wood. It wants to be a little bit stout, it doesn't want to sag, otherwise it may be too long. Got a decent square end on one end, and you've guessed it, I'm just going to place it in position, keeping it parallel, and near the top, mark the back off. So therefore, that's my length. The other thing I can do is cut that and try it in and see how it fits. And there you have it, it's absolutely perfect. So that's one of my preferred methods of doing everything in woodwork, is using a rod or a section of timber. And now I'll transfer this onto the joists. We're going to get them all cut. The joists are going in at 300 centers. Now, generally we use 400 centers or 16 inch. We're doing them at 300 centers. and that's because the manufacturer of the composite decking that I'm using recommend centers at 300. I think that's to do with obviously the weight of the product. It's also to do with flex, because there is some flex in composite, unlike timber, which is fairly stout. So we're going to stick with that as well. It's a few more joists than we would normally put in, but the deck structure will take it. It will easily eat the load. Let's get on and cut the joists. So I've got this section of timber here that I just cut between. This is my rod effectively. I'm now going to use that to cut all these joists exactly the same in a speedy fashion. Now, well, I'm a strong believer in when you stack material, I like to use it where it's stacked. I don't want to handle it twice, move it around too much, and I can quite easily work with it here right down to the ground in a stack. Obviously, if you've got bad knees, bad back, you've got to think about that a little bit more. But I'm fortunate that I'm pretty lucky in that respect. No bad knees, no bad back. So this is the way I prefer to do it, and it's much more time saving if you're not double handing stuff as well. So the way I'm going to do this is, that's my length of timber. The ends of the joists are never that square. They come out of production, they're never that square. I like to start by squaring the ends up. So I've got this square end on the end of our rod. I'm just going to put it flush with one side or the back. I'm going to take my circular saw and cut that through square. Now, I'm not going to move that rod. I'm going to put a pencil mark here. Measure that. It's 37 millimeters. And in imperial, it's 1 3/8 of an inch. So, got a little section of aluminium here. I'm going to set that back, that distance, fix it on 37. Let's square that across. The trusty roofing square. We're going to fix that on there. Now what I have here is an exact length of joist from the side of the circular saw base. So I'll just hook that onto the end of the timber, pull it straight and run it off. And I need to do that 34 times. 34 joists is the first lot of joists that I need. So I'm going to get through this pack now and see how it goes. That's it. That's all the joists cut for the first couple of bays. The next thing I'm going to do is mark them out and get them fixed. All the joists are cut and I'm just about to fit them in. It's really straightforward, just nailing them in between first. Then I'm going to wrap them at the bottom with these sort of small jiffy hangers, and they're fixed with a 35mm by 3.4mm. They're called helical screws. We used to call them twist nails in the olden days. They used to come loose and you just have to nail them all in. And anyone who's done a lot of that knows that is a killer on the fingers potentially. But with the advent of nail guns that these fit in, it's an absolute cinch. The nail gun has a little nose. You put the nose in the hole, bang, it fires it in, and it's a piece of cake. So we'll get on with doing that. So when I fix these joists in, all I'm going to do is put every fourth one in, starting in the middle, working the way out, and that will keep everything square, true and straight. And it's not going to take me long, so let's get on with it. So I'm planning on my deck structure to use a tape. Now the tape I want to use is going to go on top of the joist, and that's basically going to protect the joist. So if you imagine a deck is a series of strips, and in between those strips the daylight, the water, everything can run through. So to protect the deck or the structure, I'm going to use a tape. So I've been testing 3 types of tape which aren't intended for this purpose, but they will do the job. So they're a weathering system which you may use in timber frame around windows for air tightness, for rain screen cladding you may use it in areas and that sort of stuff. So what I did is I developed a simple test. I created these 3 troughs, and inside these 3 troughs I've got the 3 types of tape. Then I filled it with, I screwed 3 screws through each and filled it with a water-based wood stain, and that has been there for a month. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to soak that up, get rid of that water, a little bit of blue roll in each, get rid of that, and then we'll take it apart, and I want to see if there's been any penetration. So of the 3 tapes, one of them is basically without any adhesive on the back, but it's quite useful for larger sections where you might do a bigger wrap if you like. And then there's a thinner one which is self-adhesive, but I think this one's going to be too thin. It's a nice product, but it's very thin. It will do the job. I mean, it's highly flexible and it's strong. But the one I think I fancy best is similar to the large roll, and again it's self-adhesive, and I've had a piece stuck onto the top of the joist now for probably about 2 or 3 weeks in all weathers, and it's absolutely perfect. It's well on there. I mean, it's only really needed to be self-adhesive until the deck's down, and I think if you didn't have one that's self-adhesive and held in place, you don't want to staple it, so you don't want to put anything through it other than the fixings on the deck. I think that this is the ideal scenario. So the adhesive on the back is pretty good, it's pretty strong. But what we'll do is we'll have a little look at this. I'll just get that bit of wet stuff out of there. Mucky old job, look, wood stain. I'll just hold that up for you. So there you go, it's basically 3 troughs. The date when I did it, look at this mess. And I'm going to take the screws out, take it apart, and just see what the effect was. Let me just keep myself a little bit more of a clean up. So let's have a little look. So let's pull this one out. Messy job. Look at that, look. Ugh. Well, you can see how good that adhesion is on that tape. I mean, that's not going anywhere. Let me try and peel it out. Yeah, it's really quite something, that. So straight away I can see, excuse me while I fall over, straight away I can see that there's been hardly any penetration through that. So as the screws have gone in, they've kind of the material has gripped it, so it's acted like a gasket, and I think that's exactly what I'm looking for. Maybe worth putting a cut through here and seeing just exactly if there was any penetration down the screw thread. But I think it's important, if you're going to create a deck structure and you're going to put a lot of time and effort into it, to think about how to protect it for the future. And this is the way I'm going to do it. But in part 3, I'll be putting the tape on and you'll be seeing exactly what's involved in that and the thought process behind it. So my deck structure is almost complete, and I'm just going to tell you a little bit about the type of decking that I've chosen to go on top. So as I mentioned before, it's a composite material that I'm using, and there's lots of reasons behind that, but I think that the idea of a composite will last longer. Now, a lot of people don't know this, but a lot of composites actually have timber in them, and the product that I've decided to use is hardwood flour and recycled plastic, and it's incredibly well made. It's durable, it's going to be stain resistant, it's slip resistant, and I think that's really important with a deck, especially where we've got a wet area. We've got a pool on the inside here. When the doors are open, you know, I don't want people running in and out, slipping over and injuring themselves. So I embarked on looking for a product, and I went straight to the internet, as we all do, and there seems to be hundreds and hundreds of different types of composite decking. They all claim to be this and that and all the rest of it, and I needed to dig a little bit deeper. And during my research, actually in the local builders merchants, I came across a brand, and I particularly liked the look of the product and the texture of the product, which is the first consideration. I think everyone just considers, say, color to start with, but then as I sort of compared it to others, and I got plenty of samples, as you can see behind me, I realized that this was probably the product that suited me best. Now, the product that I'm going to use is called Composite Prime, and when I actually lay it, I'll talk a little bit more about the product and the system of fixing, etc. So look out for that in part 3. The reason I particularly like Composite Prime is that they are bringing out a board which is 200 millimeters, so that's 8 inches roughly in imperial, and for me that is going to be absolutely fabulous. It's a large area, there's going to be less strips, it's just going to look completely different. It's not going to be stereotypical of a small 145 millimeter board, which is around about 5.5 inches for our imperial friends, and it is a really nice product. The company also has got a special cleaner which will take oils off. So if you're having a barbecue or something like that and you drop a sausage or whatever, you're going to clean it up. It's going to, red wine or whatever, it's going to clean off of this, and that's another consideration for me. So let's look at a bit of timber deck. Now this bit of timber deck came from a site. This was something we ripped out and chucked away, and it was completely rotted. You can actually see where the boards have started to cup. They hold the water seeps into little shakes and cracks in the timber because it's always expanding and contracting, and someone has actually then coated this with something which actually doesn't do you any favors, because it actually traps the moisture in. So you might seal it, but the cracks are still there, the moisture is going to get in, and it is just going to do this. That is absolutely knackered. So we don't want any of that. We want something which is going to last us. So if you've enjoyed this video, thank you very much for watching. Look out for part 3 when I actually install the deck, talk about the fixings, how we do it, and also a little tip for you: if you are embarking on a project like this and you're going to use a composite deck, make sure that you read the manufacturer's installation instructions, because they all vary. Some are face fixed, some are clipped. There's so many variables, and also the joist spacings are crucial. Composite Prime have a spacing of 300mm centers, which is 12 inch in imperial, and that's quite tight. I mean, quite often people will build at 2 foot centers, or 600mm, or 16 inch centers, 400mm, which is more typical. But as I say, I've stuck with the recommended, and it's at 300 centers, so we've got a hell of a lot of joists in here. It's going to be super strong, and I cannot wait to get it finished, ready to have a barbecue and enjoy it. Join me again soon. I'm Robin Clevitt. This is my channel. See you soon.